angles that are tough. But I find that even having drawn for about, oh gosh, I've been drawing comics since '93, the dead-on shot is still the most difficult because it's the symmetry that you have to keep in mind. I mean, you don't want, even now I find often if I look at a drawing a week or something later, I'll find that one side of the face was swelled up more than the other side, or the eyes weren't lined up right. It's a very tricky thing to keep that sort of equal balance on either side of the face, which is why I almost never want to draw, at least I'll try to avoid it, those dead-on shots unless I really think that's the angle to go with. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. I mean, it is sort of the more difficult shot. Now, here I'll just rough out how I typically do a face for a woman. And you can see I'm still doing that sort of like, dividing the face up into shapes. I usually, this head is tilted down a little bit in my mind, so I'm going to kind of rough out where the forehead kind of is. I guess I leaned on the button again. Let's see here. Let me see if I can turn that off again. Yeah, okay. So that's still better? So now you can see I'm kind of carving out the shape a little bit more. Let's see if I got a pencil sharpener real quick. Hold on. And these are all just like frameworks, so I can sort of get it. You can kind of see now how it's starting to come together. I mean, start off with the oval, and then you get that sort of X line to target your nose and your eye line. And now I've kind of carved out what is sort of like, it flares out a little bit like where the cheekbones are, and then we tuck back in, kind of carving out the chin here. Rough kind of simple lip shape here. Like I said, kind of pretty straightforward. Now, one of the things that I find, now see, this sort of looks like it's working out like it'll be okay. I probably put the ears up a little bit higher here because the head's tilted down. Now, the thing is, one of these tricks that you can do, especially when doing this, do you ever guys have that where you have a drawing and you really are proud of it? You're like, wow, this really turned out well. And you return to it maybe 3 hours later, or maybe even like 3 days later, and you're like, cannot believe you didn't see some very obvious flaws in the drawing. You're going, oh my God, like the forehead's huge, or the eyes are crooked and stuff like that. Well, a way to sort of speed up that process, to almost like travel in time to see that in advance, those sort of flaws, is a good trick is to either take it to your lamp and hold it up backwards and like look at it at a light, or hold it up to a mirror, and you will almost immediately see those flaws that you're just too close to the work to see immediately. And that's a good rule of thumb, especially when you've got something like this where you need to have the shape of the face sort of match up. I mean, that's a great way. I mean, I remember working next to Jim Lee, and he would constantly be taken up to the lamp, everything he was drawing, and he's been drawn for 10 years at that point. And it is a way to speed up that process so you really get the sense of like seeing those flaws and correct them quickly before you like send it off to an inker and then he inks it, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have caught that. You were saying you had a question?
No, I was saying, yeah.
Oh.
It's a very animation thing. They taught us that too.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it's a great tip. I mean, it's one of those ones you definitely want to hold on to. Okay, now I'll kind of move on to a 3/4 shot, which is probably the one that most of us do the most. And again, I start off with that sort of rounded shape that sort of has a little bit of a peak here where the chin is. You can kind of see this is sort of another dividing guideline. I use my eye line usually as the lower part of the eye and then build the eye up from there. Again, I don't always do this, but this is basically how I see the face. Here's the ear here, and now you kind of have your eye socket kind of area here, kind of the mouth line. All right, so then I kind of get in there a little bit more. I tend to do the eyes also in that sort of similar shape. Like I start off sort of with wide-eyed, sort of. Let's see, mouth. And I'll start off. Let's say this is like we'll say this is like a cute sort of pixie type girl. So I'm going to make her smiling slightly. Her eyes are a little bit wider. open than maybe a different type of girl I would draw. I really tend to beef up the eyelashes. I find that that's a really great way to definitely feminize your figures. You know, just obviously make sure that the upper part of the eyelash is much beefier than the lower part. I'll even sometimes leave it a little bit open right here and not even close that up there. Unless I'm going for more of a villainous or a goth sort of look where I'll close that up and maybe throw even more eyeliner there. But if you're going for something kind of a little bit younger, you know, sometimes it's good to leave that little bit of that kind of open there, or in some way open, so it's not completely closed up. Sometimes I'll throw in the little cuticle part there, or whatever that's called. Let's see here, tear duct, whatever that thing is. And again, I'm kind of like, you'll notice I'm not really doing individual eyelashes. I occasionally will throw them in there, but it's more of a shape. And sometimes I'll throw the occasional, like, just little stray one, but it's really just more about shape, really, in there. And if I want her to be more, like I said, of a sort of a young, innocent type girl, I'll try to leave, this is the full reflection, of course, of the light, but I'll try to leave some space between the black part of her eye and the upper lid, because that's kind of gives you a little bit more of a wide-eyed look. Once the upper lid starts to touch the black part of the eye, then you're starting to give her that sort of sultry look, so you got to be careful about that. I also will raise the eyebrows a bit up higher off the head to kind of give her that almost constant sort of subtle surprise look where she's always like kind of bewildered when she walks into a room, kind of. I'll give her that kind of like little cute like ski ramp kind of nose or whatever you want to call it. Like a little upturn. Sometimes I'll throw like some cross hatching or something on there to kind of give it the sense of like almost like a blushing on the nose, or like a little bit of a freckle kind of appearance or something like that. And also too, now with this cheek area here, you know, because she's younger, I might actually swell it out just a little bit, not to make her look heavy or anything, but just to have her look like she doesn't have those like chiseled cheekbones. You know, it's a softer sort of younger look. And even her lips are a little bit smaller than I would maybe do if I was doing like a real vamp. So now you can kind of see kind of how that's kind of coming together. Maybe she'd have like a little pixie kind of hairdo or something, I'm not sure, you know.
How do you draw hair? How do you think about it?
I think of it as like, I used to, when I first got into the business, I used to think of it as strands. And then I think once I started going back to sort of my Disney influences, I realized that they were more about locks and shapes. And I still sort of look, so nowadays I tend to think of it more like that. Like if I'm going to do hair, I try to think of like clumps and shapes, like how would it go? Like, okay, well, you know, we'll have this initial strand, and then, but then I'm like, okay, this would be a good shape. This is like a chunk, almost like it's almost like a toy, like made out of plastic or something like that. But you get these really good sort of interesting angles and shapes. But I don't try to think of it as individual strands as much as like I said, big shapes. And you can go in there and throw the individual strands in afterwards, but that's after I carve out, you know, like I said, what are going to be the initial sort of shapes of the whole thing. Now, if I was to do the same type of angle with like a